What is autism? Autism is a brain-based difference or neurodevelopmental disorder that affects the way a child's brain develops. Autism affects how a person relates to the world around them. Each child with autism has different strengths and needs. They have things they're good at and things they may need more help with. You may already know someone with autism, maybe a family member or a neighbor or a friend or a coworker. Autism looks different for each person throughout their life, but many children with autism have similarities, like difficulty with social skills and language. Some children can speak with a lot of words, in full sentences, while others may use fewer words or no words at all. But communication is much more than words. We communicate with body language, our voice, our facial expression, and eye contact. It helps us to tell how we are feeling as well as how others are feeling. We communicate to tell others what we want, to show our emotions, and share ideas. Children with autism often struggle with this type of communication. This can make it hard to make friends and play with their peers. Many children with autism have repetitive behaviors, like flapping their hands, jumping, or repeating the same word or sounds. It can feel good and be calming, but sometimes it's not. Others may have specific interests and know everything about birds, or planes, or trees. And some children might really like routine or the same thing every day, like using the same purple pencil or taking the same route home from school or eating the same snack every day. Change can be hard for children with autism, like if they're excited to go swimming in the lake, but it started raining with thunder and lightning and they had to cancel those swimming plans. This can be very upsetting and make change in plans hard to adjust to. Many children also have trouble with sensory differences. Sounds might be too loud, or lights too bright, or sweaters too itchy, or soaps might smell too strong. They can also have challenges with fine motor skills like using their fingers to hold a pencil to write, or putting toys in a box or beating, as well as gross motor skills, using their bodies to run or to throw a ball or climb stairs. Sometimes these challenges cause children to feel more anxious and can lower their self-esteem. Children with autism may have trouble with one of these challenges, while others have challenges with many. A child with autism may experience other challenges such as sleep or eating difficulties, difficulties with attention and anxiety. Throughout their life, some children with autism will need more daily support to do the things they love and enjoy and to stay safe, while others may need less support and those needs may be changed over time. A person with autism may have difficulties. However, they are not defined by those challenges. Children with autism can have many strengths and gifts. They look at the world in a different way and reflect a wide range of diversity among people in our communities. Understanding the child as an individual and discovering their gifts can take time, but it's worth the effort and every child can grow and learn. More importantly, a child on the autism spectrum is a person with loving family members, a person with joys and interests, a person who should be accepted and included in their community, and a person who should have equal opportunity to succeed in adulthood like anyone else. My name is Brent Gunner and I am from Moose Factory, Ontario, Moose Creek First Nation.
Hello, my name is Monica Hemian. I'm the Jordan's Principal Coordinator for Anishinaabe Nation, and I'm here to present on Jordan's Principle. This is a recorded presentation. Jordan River Anderson was born in 1999 with complex medical needs and stayed in hospital from birth. He was a First Nations child from Norway House Cree Nation in Manitoba. When he was 2 years old, doctors said that he could move to a special home for his medical needs. However, the federal and provincial governments could not agree on who would pay for this home-based care. Jordan stayed in hospital until he passed away at the age of 5. In 2007, the House of Commons passed Jordan's Principle in memory of Jordan. It was a commitment that First Nations children would get the products, services, and supports they need when they need them. Today, Jordan's Principle is a legal obligation, which means there is no end date, and Jordan's Principle will support First Nations children for generations to come. Initially, the federal government limited the access to this important service. In a landmark ruling on January 26, 2016, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ordered the federal government to immediately stop applying a limited and discriminatory definition of Jordan's Principle and to immediately take measures to implement the full meaning and scope of the principle. On May 26, 2017, the tribunal found that the Government of Canada has continued its pattern of conduct and narrow focus with respect to Jordan's Principle, resulting in unnecessary and unlawful bureaucratic delays, gaps, and denials of essential public services to First Nations children. The tribunal said that substantive equality for First Nations children means services and supports must not perpetuate historical disadvantages endured by Indigenous or Aboriginal peoples, address the intergenerational trauma caused by residential schools, narrow the gap between First Nations and the rest of Canadian society, meet the real needs, example, additional needs of First Nations versus others, needs of specific First Nations, and provide services that are culturally appropriate, break the cycle of outside control, and be comparable quality to those off reserve. When we look at equality versus substantive equality, we have to look at that historical disadvantage, that intergenerational trauma, and the gap in quality services. So when we look at the needs of First Nations children, we need a little bit more just to get an even play field than other people in Canada. Substantive equality ensures that First Nations children can stay with their families and communities wherever possible. That needs resulting from historical disadvantage are addressed, that First Nations children do not face disadvantage due to race, nationality, or ethnicity, culturally appropriate services, community and family can serve, protect, and nurture its children in its own way to honor resilience, healing, and self-determination. And how do we apply substantive equality in Jordan's Principle applications? We need to look at the child's unique needs. Does your child face any unique circumstance that makes access to this support especially important to them as an individual? Example, mental or physical health needs or conditions. Will this request help your child fulfill their cultural needs or strengthen their Indigenous identity? Will this request help your child strengthen their relationship with their traditional territories? Will this request help your child learn more about their language, traditions, or culture? Is this support needed to help your child participate in school? Will this support help your child overcome any barriers or challenges related to being First Nations, for example, systemic discrimination or inaccessibility to services? If this support is not provided, would your child have to be away from your community for an extended period? If this support was not provided, would your child experience any disruption in his, her, or their care? Example, who their caregiver is day to day? Is there any risk that children's aid may be involved with your family if this support is not provided? Will the support help your child's family to build resilience and healing? When we look at history and geography, has your family experienced trauma? Example, residential school, child welfare involvement, removal from the land, abuse? Is this support available to your First Nations? If not, how far would you have to travel to access this support for your child? Who is eligible for Jordan's Principle? Currently, a child under the age of majority in the province or territory they reside, and in Ontario that is 18, can access Jordan's Principle if they permanently reside in Canada and are a First Nations child registered under the Indian Act on or off reserve, a First Nations child eligible for registration under the Indian Act, a First Nations child without Indian Act status who are ordinarily reside on reserve, First Nations children without Indian Act status or not eligible for Indian Act status who are living off reserve but are recognized as a member of their First Nation and who have urgent and life-threatening needs will be provided the services required to meet this urgent and life-threatening needs pursuant to Jordan's Principle. But it's important to note on July 17th, 2020, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal affirmed that the determination of First Nations citizenships falls uniquely within the purview of First Nations. Additionally, the tribunal has affirmed that the principle of best interests of the child needs to be understood from an Indigenous lens. The parties involved, which NANA's included, presented eligibility criteria to the tribunal on October 19, 2020, and we're just waiting for that to come through. What is covered under Jordan's Principle? Jordan's Principle responds to the unmet needs of First Nations children no matter where they live in Canada. Jordan's Principle can inform families about the help available for their child and how to access it, coordinate access to products, services, and supports, provide funding when it's needed to make sure products, services, and supports are accessed without delay. Examples of what can be funded. So in health, you can have mobility aids, wheelchair ramps, canes, braces, specialized hearing aids, addiction services and mental health services, traditional healing services, elder services, assessments and screenings, transportation to services, medical appointments, medical equipment and supplies, specialized equipment, long-term care for children with specialized needs, therapeutic services for children and or groups like speech, language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, ABA therapy. When we look at social workers, counseling services, land-based activities, personal support workers, specialized summer camps, respite care, individual or group, specialized programs based on cultural beliefs and practices. When we look at education, you can have school supplies, tutoring services, teaching assistants, specialized school transportation, psychoeducational assessments, assistive technologies, and electronics. What is needed for the request? Registration number of the child or parent under the Indian Act, if available, the product, service, or support needed, how often the product, service, or support will be needed, if it's a one-time, many-time, or ongoing need, estimated cost, if known, copies of related prescriptions, referrals from health, social, or education professionals, if you have them, medical, educational, social assessments identifying the need of the product, service, or support. If the request has been submitted in the past, the name of the provincial or federal program or service where the request was submitted and copies of the documents submitted if available, and substantive equality, summary of the child's history and unique needs that should be considered to support the request. How to send in a request? There are local service coordinators in First Nations communities or organizations across Canada. Jordan's Principle Call Center is a 1-800 number that's open 24/7. And that is the one recommendation that we give when the families themselves might not have technology or might not have the support. They can call directly and they can guide them through the system and give them specific requests of what documentation is needed. Or you can email the email address there. Before you send in a request, make sure all your documentation plus your consent forms are included in the package. You as workers with the clients would have consent forms, and it would just be your agency consent forms if you're applying on behalf of the family. Timelines for processing the requests. Requests for child or children in the same family or with the same guardian. Urgent requests should be processed within 12 hours of receiving all necessary documentation. All other requests are processed within 48 hours of receiving all necessary documentation. Requests for groups of children from multiple families or guardians. Urgent requests are processed within 48 hours, receiving all necessary information, and all other requests are processed within 1 week of receiving all necessary information. With that said, there is a delay at Indigenous Services Canada, and those timelines are not being kept. So we have a need to follow up as often as we can until we get an answer. Approved requests are managed in 2 ways. Where possible, ISC will arrange the product, service, and supports to be provided directly to the child or children. In these situations, there is no cost to the family, guardian, child, or authorized representative, and reimbursement is arranged directly with the service provider or vendor. If the family, guardian, child, or authorized representative has already paid for the approved product, service, or support, then reimbursements for the expense will be provided. If requests are denied, the requester may have an appeal decision within 1 year of the date of denial. To do so, they must send a written request to their regional Jordan's Principle representative At a minimum, the request for the appeal must contain the child's name and date of birth, the product or service requested, the date of denial, and the copy of the Jordan's Principle denial letter. Although it is not required to begin an appeal, you must also include additional information such as assessments, information showing that the request will help ensure substantive equality, access to culturally appropriate services, and meet the best interest of the child. NAN territory encompasses James Bay Treaty Number 9 and the Ontario portion of Treaty Number 5, a landmass covering 2/3 the province of Ontario, spanning 210,000 square miles. Our people traditionally speak Cree and Algonquin in the east, Oji-Cree in the west, and Ojibwe in the central south area. NAN represents 49 First Nations communities with a total of population on and off reserve of approximately 45,000 people, grouped by tribal councils. 6 of our member nations are not affiliated with a specific tribal council. What has NAN done that can assist with Jordan's Principle? NAN has also established working groups in clinical mentorship, case management, and parent working groups. These working groups allow parents, clinical service providers, and case management teams to participate in dialogue about what they see or hope to happen in terms of their children. These may include gaps that hinder in service coordination for their children, how to better service the children, and NAN sees the case management and Jordan's Principle navigation coordination are key to assisting families with the application process, follow-up, and advocacy needed to ensure that these services and supports are being provided. NAN wants to ensure an increase of families wanting to apply for services and supports under Jordan's Principle. We have looked at how Jordan's Principle is run throughout the country and believe that the process should be supported within our communities and tribal councils. The vision of having workers within the communities and coordinators within our tribal councils will be a step towards that. NAN coordinator can assist with the onboarding and training of these frontline staff, provide updates and information, and be an advocate for the applications that are delayed or denied. If you have any questions, this is my contact information, and I would be glad to respond to any email questions. Thank you. Hi there. So we have some questions that I'll answer. The first question is, if a family has got funds approved but wasn't able to use the funds in 6 to 12-month period, are those funds still set aside for the client, or do we need to apply for Jordan's Principle again? No, you don't. Those funds should still sit there unless something else had happened and you had said that they would be spent by a certain date. They're really the date that they ask you to use the money up by. You could just connect with them and use the same ISK number that comes with the file and let them know that you need to spend the funds now. Or if there is a change in how you want to spend the funds, you just have to update the referral letter or the quote that you would need. Another question is, if IBI therapy is approved once, will it continue to be approved in the future? It should. That's why we strongly suggest that you write a Jordan's Principle for someone you know that's going to once a week, once a month, etc., that you write that in the application process, that it's going to be ongoing for X amount of years, and to make sure the referral letter from the professional has the same information on it. And then that way they will approve for an extended period of time. Is respite or home support eligible expense? Yes, it is. Absolutely. And we also do, they could direct fund respite for someone, especially if someone who has autism really connects with someone and that person could be a family member and you want to just pay them, they will also pay for respite for that. And home support, yes, whatever's not covered from the provincial or federal agencies like FNIB or the Ontario government, whatever's not covered, then Jordan's Principle you could write an application for. Is mileage covered for therapy? Yes, it is. You just have to put that in the application process. You could put everything related to the therapy itself should go in the application, including mileage. It could be a taxi quote that you can get from someone within a taxi organization, or it could be mileage as well. Another question is, can a school principal submit an application? So like I said in the presentation, anyone can submit an application on behalf of the parents, but they have to have the parents or guardian consent. And so a consent form from the school that's signed by the parent would need to accompany the application. Is Jordan's Principle connected to each First Nations community, or is there a central location for applications? So Jordan's Principle is through Indigenous Services Canada. So all applications go directly to Indigenous Services Canada, whether it's an individual or a group application. There are some coordinators or workers within tribal councils or communities that can help people out, or sometimes in agencies. But again, those are just people to help fill out the applications. The applications go directly to Indigenous Services Canada. Who determines if it is an urgent referral or not? Do you put that within the request? So the applicant would determine who, if it's an urgent request, and it could be urgent in the sense of it's a medical need. It could be urgent time sensitive wise. We could be trying to get someone a second escort covered from the north to go somewhere and they need to go immediately. So that would be an urgent request. So anyone can put urgent on their referral. And I strongly suggest that you put urgent in the subject bar when you're putting in an application to ISC, because then that'll just alert the person who screens them. Who determines if a referral is urgent? Oh, sorry, that's the same question. Let's see here next. What is your contact information? So that was in the slide presentation, and I did respond in writing to this question. It's mhemeon, MHEMEON @nan.ca. If a family cannot find their documentation for their status, but know it is in their heritage, can they still apply? You do have to have a link to a status individual, whether it's the parent or guardian or the child. So you would need a status number for sure. And if you're applying in any of the criteria when it comes under a parent, you'd need the parent or guardian's status number. Or if you're applying as the First Nation acknowledges that you're from their First Nation, then you would need a letter from Chief and Council and the band registry. The next question is the new changes that came down today, were those covered? So they weren't. Between filming and doing the presentation, there has been a change. Like I mentioned in the slide, that the CHRT made a ruling that in First Nations people should be the ones that determine the eligibility criteria for Jordan's Principle. So the new CHRT rulings are that a child is registered or eligible to be registered under the Indian Act as amended to time. The second is the child has one parent or guardian who is eligible to be registered under the Indian Act. The third is a child is recognized by their nation for the purposes of Jordan's Principle. And the fourth is the child is ordinarily a resident on reserve. So it did finalize and take away a lot of the fluff that the federal government had put the eligibility criteria. So now it's if you can be recognized by the First Nation itself, or if you live on the First Nation. So in that sense, if a teacher goes up to the north and they're bringing their family up there and something happens and the child of the teacher needs something urgently, then Jordan's Principle could cover that. So the next question is there a list for NAN Jordan Principle Service Coordinators online? We're just working on a web page on the NAN site that we can put all that contact information on there. As it stands currently, the 49 communities that NAN covers, we have 12 workers within the 49 communities, and we have 3 out of the 6 tribal councils have coordinators within the tribal council. So if the community isn't covered, then we try to support them to fill out an application. The next question is do you have a list of names and numbers, which I just mentioned? You can connect with me and I can look into the community that you are asking about, but stay tuned and it should be up on the NAN website at some point. How do respite services work? Does the family pay first and get reimbursement, or does ISC release payment to the respite worker? So it's both ways. If something is pre-applied for and you have someone that's willing to do respite services and they're just waiting for the approval, then ISC can definitely pay that person directly or that service directly if it's Westway, or they can reimburse as long as they get the approval for it. So then you're not guaranteed a reimbursement until you get the approval for the service. Can my child get OAP funds and JP funds at the same time? Yes, when we overlap with agencies, they'll just want to know in the application which agencies that are involved with this child already. And if it's something that's not covered from one agency, absolutely, Jordan's Principal can fill the gaps. Will Jordan's Principal cover IT costs for my child? Absolutely. We know that there's a lot of educational and learning devices that are needed for some of our children, especially with autism. So you just fill out a Jordan's application for that, putting in whatever quotes that you can for the IT equipment that you need, and make sure you have a referral there from either a speech and language pathologist, a pediatrician that specializes. They just need to see that it's an actual needed item. Does the PAP interim funding need to be used up before applying for Jordan's Principal? Like I said, it's separate from any other funding. You just need to let them know what funding they're getting and what it is that is a gap in service, and put that on the application. But no, you don't. You can apply at the same time. The next question is the same. So basically funding, you could definitely apply for Jordan's Principal regardless of what funding is being received by the child at the time. You just need to let them know what is being received. Can Jordan's Principal funding be used for summer camp that is not autism specific, or if it will help the child's social skills? So again, with that question, as long as you can tie in the application the need for it, that it's a gap in some area in the child's life, and that it meets those criteria for the CRT rulings, or if it's for a medical need or a mental health need or a cultural need. There are cultural-based camps that they are covering for kids, especially kids that are struggling. So absolutely, any camp could be covered as long as you can tie in the need for it with the child, and also have letters of support from their providers, whether it's, if it's a mental health, maybe their counselor or maybe the pediatrician, as long as you could prove that there is a need. And I think that that's all the questions that aren't duplicates. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from some of you, and take care. Bye.